They began to clean up. No tools, just their bare hands. Jack bent down and scooped out handfuls of mud. Tu Tien gathered the clothes, wrung them out, and hung them on the remaining fence. The mother dog followed quietly behind them, stopping to sniff and whine softly, as if calling her children. The tabby cat had climbed up on the rafters, lying there with her eyes half closed, looking down, her tail occasionally swaying as if to reassure her master. The historic flood swept through the peaceful countryside, leaving behind only bare roofs, muddy roads, and sunburned faces that shone with the will to live. Tu Tien had no place to return to. Her small house, once filled with laughter and the scent of the kitchen, was now just a low-lying area filled with mud and broken planks. In that situation, Jack did not hesitate to bring Tu Tien to his house to stay temporarily. Jack's house was on higher ground, thus avoiding the wrath of the water. Although it was not spacious, Jack's mother still happily cleaned a small room for Tu Tien to rest, while Jack quietly brought out clean clothes and hot bowls of rice, as if it was the obvious thing to do. The next morning, the dew was still on the wet branches, and Tu Tien had not yet woken up. The small room where she was staying was quiet, with only the sound of steady breathing and the thin sunlight filtering through the cracks in the door. In the living room, Jack's mother was cleaning the living room, while Jack stood quietly on the porch, his eyes looking towards Ly Tu Tien's farm. He was silent for a long time, then turned to his mother, his voice low and firm. "Mom, I want to rebuild a house for Tu Tien. Not a temporary one, but a real one, where she can start over." His mother paused, looking at her son in surprise but saying nothing. Jack continued, his eyes serious. "I know. She lost everything after the flood. But I don't want her to live on pity alone. I love her, Mom, and I want to give her a real home, a place to call mine." Jack's mother was silent for a moment, then slowly nodded. Then she said, "My son has truly grown up. Do whatever you think is right. I believe in you." In that moment, Jack's silent love gradually turned into action, starting from his dream of a house. While Jack and his mother were talking, light footsteps echoed from the old wooden stairs. Tu Tien, in her usual familiar shirt, walked down with a face still dazed from not completely gone sleep. Her hair was loose, a few strands still wet with dew. Jack turned around, his eyes gentle as the early morning sun. He stood up, gently pulled her hand. "Sit down here. I just made tea." Tu Tien nodded slightly. Her eyes hesitated a bit, but then sat next to Jack. Jack sat down next to her, gently stroking the porcelain cup in his palm, then said in a warm voice, "I'm going to go check on some constructions after the flood. You stay home with Mom. If you need anything, just tell Mom. I'll be back soon." Tu Tien looked at him gently, her eyes softening in that simple warmth. After saying goodbye to his mother and Tu Tien, Jack carried the file, put on his hard hat and walked out of the house. The sky was still gloomy. The gentle wind carried the cold mist of the rains that had remained after the flood. The road leading to the construction site was muddy and slippery, with traces of water that had not yet receded on both sides. However, Jack walked steadily, his eyes determined, because he understood that there were things that needed to be started over, from this very rubble. When he arrived, he saw a few workers cleaning up the scene. Piles of bricks were scattered, water-soaked boards were piled up, and some construction equipment was buried in the mud. Jack approached, put his hand on Uncle Thong's shoulder, an elderly worker whom he respected very much, and asked softly, "Is everyone okay? Uncle, is anyone injured?" Uncle Thong looked at him, his face haggard but still maintaining a resolute expression. "Luckily, everyone is fine. Everyone is safe. When the flood came, we managed to run to the highlands. But the damage to the materials was too much. Jack, the cement was washed away. The steel rusted, some were stuck in the mud, and could not be dug up yet." He sighed, wiping the sweat from his forehead even though the weather was not sunny. "The difficulty now is that the rain is still going on. The forecast says it won't stop completely soon. But we're used to it. We can endure the hardship. As long as there are people, hands and feet, the project will be rebuilt." Jack nodded, his heart filled with both sympathy and admiration. He looked around the construction site, which once promised a warm home for many families, but now was just muddy ground and dreams swept away by the wind. But in the eyes of workers like Mr. Thong, he saw a glimmer of hope, the only thing that could not be swept away by the flood. And at that moment, Jack became even more determined. He wanted to not only rebuild houses, but also rebuild trust, starting with the small house for Tu Tien, and continuing with all those who were clinging to this place. The sky had just cleared after days of continuous rain. Thin patches of sunlight fell on the old farm, which used to be Tu Tien's familiar home. The dirt road leading to the gate was still muddy, but in her eyes at this moment, nothing could stop her from returning. Every branch and bush of grass was still soaked with water, wet and drooping, but when Tu Tien stepped in, that place seemed to light up with the presence of the old owner, the one who had tended each vegetable bed and cherished each animal every day. The yellow dog rushed out from the bushes, barking happily. It ran around Tu Tien, jumped on her, its eyes shining with joy as if it couldn't believe that the person it had been waiting for had actually returned. A few kittens also crept over from the collapsed porch, meowing and playing around her feet. Tu Tien sat down, hugging the yellow dog, her eyes stinging. She stroked its muddy fur, then stood up and went into the barn to get food for the animals. The remaining bags of feed were wet, but she still tried to scoop out the usable parts. She divided a portion for each animal, pouring the feed and coaxing them gently, as if making up for the days they had been alone without anyone to care for them. Under the pale sunlight, the scene seemed to come to life, the meowing of cats, the barking of dogs, mixed with the light footsteps of a girl after the storm. After feeding the animals, Tu Tien started cleaning the farm. The debris left by the flood was scattered everywhere, broken tiles, broken tree trunks, rotten branches and leaves scattered around the yard. She quietly gathered each piece of trash into a corner, then took the bucket to the well to wash each cup and bowl that was still covered in mud. The water bucket had tipped over, so she set it up, cleaned the inside, and hung it out to dry. Despite the hard work and her hands blistering from being in the water for so long, she persevered without stopping. She did not want to abandon this place, because it had been her everything, her memories, her hopes, her days of living independently and freely. When she sat down on the steps to rest, looking around the desolate farm, Tu Tien's heart suddenly tightened. She took out an old handkerchief from her pocket, wiped the sweat from her forehead. Her eyes stopped at the collapsed roof of the doghouse, and she sighed. Now, to rebuild the farm would cost a lot of money: wood, corrugated iron, posts, cement, not to mention animal feed and new seeds. She knew she didn't have enough money to do all that. After the flood, all her capital had gone down the drain. She couldn't always rely on Jack, even though he was always there silently, taking care of every little thing. But she still had many hesitations. She didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to depend on anyone, even the person she loved. Thinking of that, Tu Tien stood up. She took her basket and went to the field to buy pumpkins from the farmers in the area. She picked the biggest, firmest ones, and put them in a bamboo basket. The basket was no longer new. A few ribs were broken, but it was still enough for her to carry to the market. On the way, Tu Tien thought as she walked, if she could sell a little, it would be enough to buy food for the cats and dogs, and then gradually figure out what to do next. The road to the market was still muddy, with many slippery sections, but Tu Tien walked very steadily. The load of pumpkins on her shoulders was heavy. Sweat was pouring out, but she did not complain. She just wanted to do something for herself, so that this farm could be revived by her own hands, not only thanks to Jack, but thanks to the determination she had forged over many years of farming. The market was not as crowded as usual, but everyone was struggling to recover after the storm. So fresh, clean products like her pumpkins were still in demand. Tu Tien gently greeted each person, weighed the pumpkin, received the money, thanked them, and smiled gently even though her heart was still filled with worries. By the end of the session, She had sold almost everything. Although it was not much money, it was a start. She held that small amount of money in her hand, as if she was holding on to a ray of hope. While Tu Tien was carrying a basket of pumpkins to the market, under the pale yellow sunlight of the morning, Jack was also present at the old farm, which had just suffered the most severe flood in many years. Accompanying him were 2 engineers and a group of familiar construction workers, the people he trusted the most in the team. As soon as they passed through the dilapidated bamboo gate, the whole group could clearly feel the heavy devastation caused by the water. The smell of mold, mud and broken pieces of roof tiles and rotten wood made everyone quiet for a moment. Jack said nothing, just quietly led the way, holding a simple drawing in his hand, the general layout of the farm that he had carefully noted down in advance. He led everyone through each area. The dog kennel had tilted. The well needed to be reinforced. A corner of the root warehouse had collapsed, and the corner of the vegetable garden that was once Tu Tien's pride was now just a patchy field. As he walked, Jack explained each idea. The barn should be rebuilt with a light steel frame, the corrugated iron roof with a better drainage system. The internal roads should be repaved with anti-slip bricks. He carefully asked for each person's opinion, listened and recorded construction plans that were safe, economical, and still ensured sustainability. In Jack's heart, this farm was not just a piece of land, but a place where Tu Tien had placed all her trust, and he wanted to give her back a place not only to live, but also to start over, with all hope. On the way back from the market, when passing by the small stream at the beginning of the village, Tu Tien heard the sound of laughter. She stopped, looked down the dirt slope leading to the stream, and saw a group of children happily bathing, splashing in the muddy water. The stream water after the storm was still large, flowing faster and deeper than usual. The water was bubbling white foam, and tree roots were floating on the edge. Danger lurked everywhere. Tu Tien did not hesitate. Hurriedly called out, "Children, come ashore quickly. It's very dangerous to bathe here. The water is still large. If you slip, you'll be swept away." The children heard the call, turned around to look. Some recognized Ms. Tien, the person who often brought pumpkins and vegetables to the market, who used to give them candy, so they obediently climbed ashore. Some others felt sorry, but looking at the flowing water behind them, they also quietly followed. When everyone was ashore, Tu Tien breathed a sigh of relief and gently instructed, "It's still dangerous now. Wait until the water recedes before going out to play. Understand? Stay home and help your parents clean the house. Be very careful." The children obediently nodded, chirped their thanks and ran away. Watching the children's silhouettes disappear behind the slope, Tu Tien's heart suddenly felt strangely relieved. Even though life was still full of troubles, at least she was still trying, still holding on to the kindness and strength in her heart. On the dirt road that was still full of mud, her steps were no longer as heavy as before. At the end of the road, that farm was waiting for her to return, to start over. From the simplest things. When Tu Tien had just returned to the gate, her shoulders still covered in sweat after the long walk from the market, she was stunned when she saw Jack's familiar car parked in front of the farm. Her heart suddenly beat faster. Inside, the sound of whispering voices rang out. She stepped through the rickety bamboo gate, her eyes stopping at the group of people gathered in the middle of the yard. Jack was standing there, holding a blueprint in his hand, enthusiastically discussing with a few construction workers and engineers, looking at his figure leaning in the sun, his shirt covered in mud at the hem of his pants. Tu Tien felt her heart tremble silently. Jack turned around when he saw her enter, his eyes softening. He walked forward and said softly, "I'll bring someone to survey a bit. I want to renovate the farm for you, rebuild the roof, rebuild the barn, repave the path, everything." Tu Tien was slightly confused, looked at the group of workers and then back to Jack. She hesitantly said softly, "Jack, this farm just needs a little repair and it will be ready to use. I can do it slowly later. I don't want to bother you too much. But Jack shook his head. His eyes determined. No, Tien, you don't have to do anything. I will fix it all. Not out of responsibility or pity, but because I love you. I don't want you to suffer any more hardships. Tu Tien stood still, her eyes slightly wet, a feeling of warmth and uncertainty welling up in her heart, as if amidst the ruins of the past. A new home was quietly being built from sincere love.
Alo,
Alo chị Ngân à?
chị đây.
Vâng, em tìm được cái trường hợp là cái hôm trước chị bảo em ấy, thì là em tìm hiểu được có một bà cụ già ấy, bà ấy ở một mình thôi và ở trong rừng. Có một nhà giữa rừng thôi, nên là nếu như mà chị mà muốn lên đây công tác và đi thăm bà ấy thì là lúc nào lên thì em sẽ dẫn chị vào.
Rồi ok, để đến hôm đi thì chị sẽ liên hệ lại em nhé, để em dẫn chị đi.
Vâng.
Ok.
Vâng, thế nhá, em chào chị nhá.
Chị cảm ơn nhé.
Vâng.
Chào em.